So why don't we go ahead and start? And this is a question and answer session. So
unscripted. So any questions you got?
unscripted. So let's start. Has anybody got a question?
You're about to ask me a question, and then we.
Annual report, ownership report.
Mm-hmm.
So currently you've been providing that to us on a regular basis. So
Right.
when we come up this time, you will automatically request the information for the FRM.
What we do, just to come up with the ownership reports, if with respect to our firm, if you're our client, we make an effort to notify you in advance that the deadline's coming up for your biennial ownership report. It's every 2 years. It's going to be very easy after this transition because everyone's going to be due on December 1 of every odd year. So 12/1/17, 12/1/19. And you're also, unless they change the rules, you'll also have to do an ownership report at the time that you file your renewal application. Now, on the ownership reports, you need to list all your officers, the members of your governing board. Now, and there's no, I have non-commercial stations that say the pastor is the governing board. We only have the one. That's not common, but usually we have the people who are, and what they're called vary all over the map. Sometimes they're called board of directors, sometimes they're called elders, sometimes they're called trustees, but we need to list every one of those folks. As it presently stands, the policy is if you get to a point, and again, this is not for LPFMs. LPFMs, you've got, everything's different for LPFM and easier. But if you get a situation where more than half of your board was not previously, and I'm putting air quotes around, passed upon by the FCC, then you have to file a pro forma transfer of control application to reflect who the new membership of the board is. And that resets that count. And the next time you get to where more than half have changed, you have to file another pro forma transfer of control application.
But that's a quick one.
It's
you
quick.
file
And
it and they handle it within 7 to 10 days.
Right. It's not a big deal. You don't have to publish a notice in the newspaper. You don't have to do anything like that. But you have to keep an eye on it. Yes?
Question. As you know, we set up separate corporations. We're an LPFM.
Right.
To own additional translators, keep everything separate, which is critical.
Sure.
On the funding, we receive all of our income through our church, which owns the LPFM.
Right.
In order to fund the new corporation, we would like to take funds from that source and put them into the new corporation that owns the translators.
Okay.
There's going to be a paper trail
Right.
between. Is that a problem?
Can I ask for clarification? Does the church own the new corporation?
No, it's completely separate.
Completely
They basically friends, kind of
Yep.
a friends
Yep.
of organization. It's probably more of a tax question than it is an FCC question. I would say this, that I would not take any money given specifically for the LPFM and give that to the translator.
I agree, and that is a tax question, but it's also one that you need to, I mean, if you do a drive and you raise money and money is earmarked specifically for the LPFM, then you don't want to give that to the company that has the translators. You need to use, that's overall tax law.
Let me mention one thing about, and it probably doesn't come up, but there is for translators, you are allowed to interrupt the programming for 30 seconds an hour to raise funds for the translator. So if someone wanted to do that, you could break away from your other programming and say, if you're listening to this station, this translator, why not make a contribution? Or you could use that to acknowledge underwriting contributions for the translator. separately. Go ahead.
Another question with that. So we have revenue share with some ministries.
Right.
So let's say we get a check for $1,000. Can we portion of that to the new translator on an assumption basis?
I'd be hesitant to do that. I would, because remember, there needs to be separation between these two entities. I would rather have the ministry give a gift to the translator company directly. Right. So where else we got? It's going to be a slide there. Go ahead.
Jim.
I'm sure I'm really showing my ignorance, but how recent is the change in origination of programming from main studio? How
Oh, the
long is
fact that it's
20
not.
years ago?
Yeah,
Yeah, 20 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not necessary to originate any programming in the main studio, but you must
have
You
the
must have
ability
one.
to.
you must have one, and you must be able to originate.
Correct.
Meaning you have to have enough equipment there to be able to actually originate if a need arose.
They're old cases, and we haven't seen this for years. The FCC actually looked in and said, this doesn't have the best equipment. This other place has the best equipment, so we think this is not right. Now, we haven't seen anything like that for years and years and years, but the main thing is that you have to have the ability to go on the air from that.
It comes
That
up more in
needs to.
television
Yes,
than
it
it does
does.
in radio.
Yeah.
Where they really will go into a studio and make sure you actually have a camera to make sure that you can,
So if we're running equipment at our transmitter sites,
Right.
and that's our primary means of automation, as long as we are able to take control from the main studio and originate programming there.
correct.
You're
fine.
okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Scott, you have a
Yes.
question?
Yes. So random inspection.
Right.
Fortunately, they are fewer than
They used to be.
past. When those occur, let's say, for instance, the FCC shows up today. I'm the primary operator of the radio station. I have people there that know the basics. But if they come in for an inspection today, are those individuals going to be required to answer all of their questions, or would they say, play that scenario out?
Okay, the inspector walks in
Yes.
and says, we have I'm trying to get me, we have a complaint that your fence around your tower's down. Okay, that would be kind of a real world complaint. Hopefully they come in, there's someone there. That person the first person that they would call would be you as the manager and say, we have a gentleman here who's from the FCC. I've looked at it, he's shown me his identification, which, by the way, you're entitled to ask for their identification. And he's got a question about that, and hopefully your response is, I'll be right down. And then you take it from there. You know.
In Myrtle Beach, then can I say, I've got somebody there who can address that?
Correct. You can have someone else, but whoever that person is, that the inspector will be taking notes, and it will come back if that person's given bad information.
Well, whoever you've got on the ground, if you're in Myrtle Beach and you've got somebody at the station and that person doesn't know the answer, they can say, I want to call my engineer and to get you accurate information. I want to call my GM in order to get you accurate information. The FCC staff isn't going to balk at that. As long as they've got somebody who is willingly allowing the FCC into the station and trying to answer the questions. But as Matt said, the inspector is going to be taking notes. So if it turns out that somebody gave incorrect information and it's discovered that they gave incorrect information, then you want to try and follow up with the inspector and say, look, this was unintentional, but let me correct the record. Here we go. Then, you know, it's not like the FCC inspection is out there to try and find a way to ding you. They're just looking. Anyway.
Well, actually, I got to tell you, it's not a revenue generator. There are so many appeal levels on any fine that they inevitably, on broadcast fines, unless it's one of the really, really big ones, they inevitably actually spend more money trying to enforce a fine than they collect. Now, if you're a telephone company and you get hit like it happened the other day, $11 million fine,
spamming.
That's a little different. For the broadcasters, when we're talking about $3,000 or $4,000 fine, they're going to spend a lot more than that. And you're, unfortunately, if you ever get in one of those ones and it's serious, you're going to spend more than that fighting it. So you want to, part of the reason you want to avoid this is so you don't have that hassle.
Yep.
Go ahead.
We're going to be addressing underwriting later today and underwriting copy and all that
Sure.
sort of thing. And I read something online that said typically close cases are resolved against you. Would that be, do you agree with
That's an
that
interesting.
statement?
Not really, no. Because the standard is under Xavier. I knew it was a Jesuit school. I couldn't remember which one. The Xavier case is that if it's close and that you have a reasonable argument that the underwriting is permissible, they're supposed to defer to the judgment of the licensee. But that's the Xavier standard. Now, the way they held against you is they say, that wasn't reasonable. So even though you might think it's a close case. I follow underwriting a lot because I represent some public broadcasting stations that they're NPR type affiliates, some was like that, and there's a lot of issues that come up about that because there's a lot of pushing of the envelope. But you know the basics. They'll go over it. There's no calls to action, no comparative, no qualitative. There are a number of cases that are internally, not in the same case, but cases that contradict one another, and you just have to go through as carefully as you can. We actually check old cases to see if we can find something that guides us.
I'm not going to dominate your time, I promise.
It's okay.
It's all right.
Well, I got you though. Along those lines, I read something online that said you should avoid the word "you" in an underwriting commercial. Like you can find more information at.
That's a call to action.
Right.
That's.
You can see in my mind. You can is a statement of fact. You can go here for information. It's not saying go here for information, but that's kind of borderline.
If you say information is available at, it's less forceful
Right.
in terms of a call to action than you can.
So take out the word the
You can.
Say more information available at ... com.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that later today.
Right.
Right.
Because I'm going to be talking about how to try to make them as creative as possible.
Sure.
Stay legal, you know what I'm saying?
Right. And just because, by the way, just because it's a fact doesn't mean
Right.
that it's not promotional.
Right. That's, yeah.
Yes, it can be absolutely accurate, an accurate statement, objectively accurate, and still can be deemed promotional.
They would see that. They would see you can as a call to action.
They could.
They could.
could.
I can't say that I've seen one there, but it's
You really have to look at the totality of the
tone, feel. Right now, the problem, not a problem, but what we've had is we haven't had a lot of rulings recently on underwriting. Partially because people, well, we think that they're being a little more loose than they used to be, and maybe members of the public are getting more used to it. The other thing is that when they are resolved, they're usually resolved by consent decrees, which doesn't give us the type of information that we would like in these decisions. Because sometimes in the old days when they weren't consent decrees, we'd get the actual, I won't say the old days, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we'd get the actual language of the spot. So we could go in and say, you know, for instance, just to give you, you've got a whole thing. Established in 1928, fine. Oldest in the county, not fine.
right.
Right.
It's comparative.
Right. So those are some of the things that you run into. And I have to say, most of the time that people get dinged, it is smaller organizations that get dinged for these. I don't know whether that's a prejudice on the part of the FCC staff. I don't think so. It's just maybe they are the people that draw complaints. And typically those complaints come from your competitors, not from the
Right.
public.
That was my next question. Most of those issues arise from somebody alerting them. I mean, the likelihood of them picking up on this is going to be, without somebody knowing.
Very small.
Zero.
Absolutely.
And-
They won't go out and affirmatively look for violations of the underwriting rule. It's all based on complaints.
Indeed, we represent, the firm represents a public broadcaster in Washington, D.C., fairly prominent one. And we've gotten the undertone from the commission staff that they're not going to they're not going to come to us in any official way if they hear something on our air that they don't think is in compliance with the rules. They're not going to use the fact that they happen to live in Washington, D.C. as a reason to come after it. Now, we have had one occasion where an FCC person who was not in his line of responsibility, but someone we knew, said, you know, you might look at that spot. And we did, and in fact agreed with them. But generally speaking, the commission is not policing this themselves. They're reacting to complaints. And like I say, most of those complaints come from your commercial competitors. Go ahead, Bill.
Here's a question that comes up all the time in our circles. My church is running a trip to Israel.
Right.
And if you sign up, the travel agent handles the arrangements, and obviously a lot of people are making money. We're not, but they are. So we go on the radio and say, Calvary Chapel is, you should come to Israel with us. For more information, call 800, whatever. Some people say, well, if you give them the church number, that's okay, but if you give them the travel agent's number, that's not okay, but does it really matter? Because it's all going to support the travel agents.
Oh, it matters.
It does matter, and I will tell you, I handled specifically this question in the last couple of months. The answer that we got from the FCC staff, because it's a fairly close balance there, is that by sending it directly to a for-profit travel agency, you're too close to the line. That's what the staff came back to us with. If the church buys a certain number of spots to be made available on the trip, and so a listener comes in and buys one of the spots that the church has purchased from the travel agency, then you're okay. It's the sending it directly to the commercial operator that's problematic for the FCC. Now, Matt and I had this discussion just yesterday. There are permutations, and you had an interesting workaround that I didn't actually suggest.
Well, one of the workarounds is that, yeah, you buy one spot. And certainly the travel agency is going to say, oh, you want another? Here's another. Here's another. Here's another. And when you get to 10, you know, there's typically in these travel, then someone gets a free trip or something like that. But the point of it, the underlying thing is that you're not supposed to jointly raise funds with a for-profit entity. In fact, you're not supposed to jointly raise funds with anybody else. You're supposed to only be raising funds over the air for the radio station. And I actually, for the radio station. Right. At least the interruption of regular programming to raise funds only should be for the radio station, not, for instance, for the church. People could debate about whether you could run spots or underwriting announcements for the church itself and ask for contributions. I would be cautious about that. It's probably okay, but I'd be cautious. But the point is, and getting back to your issue with the travels, because it comes up a lot.
It does.
It comes up a lot, is that you've got to be in a situation where it's viewed by an objective observer as a fundraiser for the station rather than a joint fundraising effort between the for-profit tour company and the station. So
bearing in mind, of course, that what may seem like a joint fundraising opportunity with a for-profit travel agency in this instance could be seen differently by different people. So again, while the FCC is not likely to reach out on its own, they're only going to do it on the basis of a complaint that's filed, you do need to be cognizant that different people could see it different ways. So it's worth the time to analyze it to try and make sure that you're really in compliance with the rules.
Right, because we're not on the line for anything with the travelers. If we get 50 people and if 51 come, then we're not taking any risk. Like, you know, I know a lot of it has to do with risk. If I buy 50 books, put them on my bookshelf, and I own them, and I want to sell them to raise money for the station, I can do that because they're my books. And
correct.
I'm profit.
Right, and if you don't sell them, you know.
I can't do that. So, I mean, if I have them still a little muddy.
It is a little muddy.
It is muddy, and that's pretty much the situation which I just went through, where the staff came back and said, that's probably over the line. And specifically where you send them to your website, and the website has a direct link to the for-profit travel agency. That's where the staff had a problem.
Yeah.
I'm a newbie and I'm confused. Can a nonprofit be a sponsor and can they solicit money for themselves? Like another church is underwriting for us.
Well, yes, as a matter of fact. Can they solicit? Let me break down and answer one firmly and the other one saying, I don't know. Yes, another one of the things of underwriting, all of the underwriting restrictions only apply to for-profit entities and political campaigns. We'll leave political campaigns out the side, or people that want to express let me back up. Section 399B is where all of these restrictions come from. Section 399B of the Communications Act, and it classifies advertisement, putting air quotes around advertisement, as three different things. Announcements for remuneration for a for-profit entity, announcements to express the opinion of any person with respect to a matter of public interest or importance. It's not national, public interest or importance. And the third one escapes me. I'm sorry. So that means that if a nonprofit comes to you and wants to run an underwriting announcement, and say let's say a church says, we're going to have a community fair at our church, and admission is $10. Notice I'm saying at the church, because it gets really complicated if it's somewhere else. They can do that. You can run that spot because they're a nonprofit, and that's fine. You can run the classic example we have around ours. If the local symphony, which is a nonprofit almost certainly, wants to have you advertise that they have tickets for sale, that's okay because they're a nonprofit.
So the nonprofit can do call to action.
Correct.
Yeah.
They can do anything. They can do almost anything they want. Now, your second question is, could they solicit donations over there?
We have the Good Shepherd's Clothes Closet.
Right.
They're 501c3. It's a thrift store that's free, and they give clothes to the homeless people.
Okay.
We like them, so we solicit for volunteers, donations of clothes, and donations of money to help run their organization.
Okay. As long, the answer I'm going to give you is as long as you do not interrupt regular programming to do that. In other words, you cannot do a share-a-thon for another entity. You can run a regular 30-second or 15-second underwriting announcement, but you can't do under the current rules and current policies, you can't do a share-a-thon or a marathon-type programming for any entity other than the licensee. And you've got to take over because I'm going to turn this off. Okay.
With a related underwriting question, you've already partially answered this. Obviously, if a 501c3 that is going to underwrite with us, we're much less concerned about call to action, et cetera.
Right.
We also understand that if a for-profit organization wants to promote an event, for example, a concert,
Right.
that we have to be very careful that we don't accept and air an underwriting spot that includes a call to action, purchase tickets for this concert when it's a for-profit organization. However, we also do, as a public service, provide a community calendar. What are the restrictions with regard to organizations who want to promote an event, but we're not actually receiving anything for that, we're just presenting it on our community calendar?
If you've received no remuneration, even implied remuneration, and remuneration can be broad, any consideration, anything that comes to you, and you've just made a decision that we want to talk about this particular concert on the air and where tickets are available, you're free to do so. Right.
But that includes giving tickets to the stations.
Correct. Correct. That's consideration.
remuneration. Yep.
Because if they give, now you're free to give away tickets as long as, over the air, sure, but then you're once again in the situation where you have to watch specifically what you put on the air. The controlling thing, Rob, is it Rob Branch that's going to do the underwriting, or
No, Taylor, Rob Taylor.
Rob Taylor's going to do it? I'm not going to take Rob's, because he may give you some other things, so I'm not going to take all the things. But basically, you have, what really is important is what you say on the air, as opposed to what they say on a website or what you say on the air. And if you certainly can say a particular group is performing, support for WXMB is provided by X group, which is appearing at the X location Friday evening at 5 o'clock. Tickets are available at blank. As long as you don't say go buy tickets, just what I described right there, that's fine. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed in a lot of again, back to the NPR people, if you want to see where the cutting edge is, you listen to NPR and you say, I guess that's the cutting edge. Because they look at those things, they're trying to raise as much money as they can. And you'll notice that when a new movie comes out, they'll have an underwriting announcement for the movie that says what it is and who is starring in it, and when it opens in theaters. And that's okay. They don't say best movie ever or go get tickets or but
Or buy
announce
tickets here.
what?
Or buy tickets here.
Or buy tickets here. So, okay, where are we going next? Okay,
Going back to the volunteers.
right.
You can ask for people in the community to go volunteer at other entities if they're a nonprofit. Is that correct?
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
Right. The key thing is not to interrupt your regular programming to raise
To do it.
funds or
Well, like at the top of the hour after the station, we normally will air underwriting or PSAs. And stuff like
PSAs.
that. If we put them in there, that's okay?
Yep.
absolutely. I realize we're supposed to be repeating the questions.
Oh,
I've been forgetting about that. So,
I have been too.
what else have we
Sorry.
gotten? Have we worn you down? Okay, all right. Okay, well, if there's not any other questions, on the agenda, you've got, that we had from the first session, you've got our telephone numbers, you've got our emails. Email works a lot better, but if you're a telephone person, feel free to give either Kathleen or me a call at any time. I'm going to mention two other things, but I'm going to ask you, take your question first.
Well, one more thing regarding the underwriting, just for clarity. Remember, like NPR, you can, a slogan or a logo or something can, as long as it's not promotional, like GE, we bring good things to life. I don't know if that's false, but that's the first one that comes to mind. But you know
Right.
what I'm saying? As long as it's not promotional in nature, those are okay. So for instance,
Correct.
but audio, playing jingles or an audio logo is frowned upon. Is that right? Or, you know what I mean? Because
I haven't had that experience, but again, I think it's the totality of the
Right.
of the spot.
But I have to say, I haven't had a music band. I mean, one thing they used to say is, first of all, they have said, the longer it is, the more likely they're going to find that it's a commercial. But I haven't had any problem with audio elements being in them.
somebody asked me about using a jingle, and I don't remember. I think the jingle lyrics might have been okay, or I can't remember what they said right now. I was hesitant just because it sounds like a commercial.
Right.
And so I said, no, I don't think we can do that. And I'd have to go back and listen again to what they were actually singing in the jingle. The tagline, the slogan for them is "The Brothers That Just Do Gutters," which I've used on the air because to me that just says what they do.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I probably would.
Okay.
I would.
I got Matthew in my question.
Yeah.
It's okay, but I was concerned with if you got somebody singing
Well, it does sound, and it's,
agree.
yeah.
I'm kind of concerned about using jingles.
Yeah, I do not know of any case where the commission has said you can't use a musical jingle. Yeah, but the whole, the underlying premise is that this is supposed to be a recognition of someone who has provided support to the station. And it's not supposed to be a commercial. But as you know, we've gotten further and further and further away from that. So,
Trying to give the underwriter the most value
for their donation, exactly.
Right.
So, now let me mention actually, I'm going to let Kathleen mention the blog.
The firm has a blog, and the easiest way to get to it is to go to our website, and then from the website there's a direct link into our blog. We post frequently, and we try and keep it light and upbeat, but give you the same content all the way through. But our blog is comlawblog.com, and the firm's website is fhhlaw.com. And as I said, the website actually has a link directly to the blog. You can post comments on the blog. We have had people send questions through the blog. So we're there to help.
We also have, the blog, by the way, is free. And you can subscribe to, so it puts out an RSS feed. We've got it set up so instead of every time we post, you get it once a day with what we've posted that day. We also have a memorandum to clients that is sent out by email once a month. Mostly it's a collection of blog pieces that we've done, but occasionally there's other pieces in it. We really encourage people to sign up for both of those things. If you sign up for the blog, the memos to clients may be a little repetitive. If you only want to do it, look at it once a month, then maybe just sign up for the memos to clients. But it's important to do so because it keeps you alerted to changes that are occurring at the FCC. And there are constantly, there's tweaks all the time in broadcast regulation. And it's cost effective for you to do this because it's free. And you know what's coming up. It's the writing, we try pretty hard to make it lively and brief.
Well, we provide enough.
All right, I'm
in
going
it.
to say lively.
I was going to say, we provide enough information in it that you should then be able to determine whether or not you've really got additional questions. We try and provide enough that you can take it and run, but where it's a matter that's very fact-specific or obligation-specific, you know whether or not you need to contact your counsel to find out more.
Bill.
A lot of people sometimes joke because they think I have a lot of the answers to their questions. I get them from reading this stuff. So, you can, the newsletter that comes out every month, it's just chock full of stuff. And if you see an article on television and you don't have a TV station, skip it.
Exactly.
But it's a well worthwhile investment to keep up with this stuff. You'll have less questions later. I see a lot of questions on the listserver, and if everybody was reading these newsletters, they wouldn't have to be posting the questions on the listserver. So,
But we're always happy to answer questions, whether we've especially the easy ones, the ones we know. That's great. So unless we have anything else. Well, it's been a real pleasure to be here. We have enjoyed doing this.
Thank you for having us.
We're happy to take over for Harry on this matter. And who knows, maybe next year we'll drag him down to make a guest appearance or an emeritus appearance. Thank you all very much.